What is going on, guys? This is the Trips Wide Week 15 podcast presented by RotoQL. I am your host, Evan Cheney. Today, joined by Gary Huber. How you doing today, Gary?
Doing well as always, Evan. I had a really good week last week. For those following along with the live final, I can't. So definitely did not cash $2 million. But had I qualified, I would have been top 5. So a sobering realization that I was not invited to that party, but a good week nonetheless.
I really like that the winning lineup had a negative score in it.
Yeah,
that
Travis
really just
Benjamin
makes you feel good.
Putting -0.2, turning into $2 million. That's pretty sweet.
Good Lord. Well, I mean, congratulations to E. Scott for doing that.
Absolutely.
Let's just jump into these games here. First one being Green Bay Packers going up against the Chicago Bears. Packers favored by 5.5 points right now in a game that has a measly 39.5 point total. James Starks is questionable this week with a concussion. Got into a car accident on Monday, so he's dealing with that. Aaron Rodgers is questionable this week with a calf injury. He hasn't practiced all week, but he should be good to go for that game on Sunday. And then on the Bears side of the ball, I don't think there are any injuries. Alshon Jeffrey is back, though, so that obviously adds a little bit of something into the mix there. That's it for injuries. Gary, what are you liking on this Packers side of the ball? Because at a 39.5 point total, I don't see anything too exciting going on.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The weather is going to dictate the gameplay here. It's going to be really cold. I want to look to the running backs in this spot. Ty Montgomery has kind of assumed that role for the Packers. Christine Michael, they brought him in, but every time he's in, they're telegraphing a run. So I think they're going to use Ty Montgomery more. So he's appealing as a play at 4,800 for me. But I am not going to be heavily invested in Aaron Rodgers or Jordy Nelson. Although they could potentially do fine in the spot, I just don't think it's a smart play. How about you?
I mean, you mentioned the weather. The projected temperature at game time is going to be 0 degrees with the 14-mile-an-hour wind. So obviously, if you're playing on FanDuel,
Exactly.
don't use kickers. That's for certain. But yeah, I mean, Ty Montgomery can work in the backfield, especially if James Starks is out. I do like the play. Chicago really isn't that great this year against the run. They're 20th, according to Football Outsiders DVOA statistics. So outside of Ty Montgomery, I'm not really in love with much. I think the wind might affect deep passing, which affects upside. So really not that much outside of Ty Montgomery for me. Then we look over at the
I'm
Bears
glad.
side. Are we saying?
I was going to do the segue, but you're doing it right now. So
Yeah.
by all means.
All right. So the Bears on the other side here, there's just nothing I can get behind here. I like if there was a competent quarterback for the Bears playing this week, I could understand using Alshon Jeffrey in a tournament in very low exposures, but just not, the play is not for me. Even though Green Bay is not even that good against wide receiver ones. They're 26th against wide receiver ones, and then with although they are 5th against receivers lined up to the left, but still, they're not really that good defensively. But I just no. In short, just no is where I'm going with this. How about you? I mean, maybe even the Packers defense might be interesting.
Packers defense is in play. Matt Barkley admitted that this was the first time he's ever thrown a pass to Alshon Jeffrey. So I'm with you on not. I think Jordan Howard is an okay play. Running backs at that price point that I like on the slate, which will cover. Given the temperature and the wind, he's in play at 6K. And the one guy I was going to bring up, kind of want your opinion on, is down at 2,500, the punt tight end. The Packers by my stats, give up the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends in PPR leagues. And Dan Brown has kind of to the mix in Chicago, but does Alshon Jeffrey coming back just take him out?
I mean, I don't like the play. The targets aren't there. He's seen 10 targets this year. No. I can't see it.
That's fair. Our punt
Right,
play is Gresham, so let's move on.
yeah, that's a pretty bad game, just overall for fantasy wise. Let's move on to our next game here. We have the Cleveland Browns going up against the Buffalo Bills. Bills are favored by a whopping 10.5 points right now in a game that has a 41.5 point total. No injuries on the Browns side of the ball, and Sammy Watkins is questionable for the Bills. After not practicing on Wednesday due to the foot, he practiced in full on Thursday, so he should be good to go. So Cleveland Browns here. I mean, Isaiah Crowell, I called it again last week. I mean, the guy put up a pretty decent game per DraftKings scoring at 15.8 DraftKings points, running the ball 10 times for 113 yards, and then catching catching one pass for 5 yards, was targeted twice. So the Isaiah Crowell play definitely paid off, and I kind of like it again to some extent. I mean, the Buffalo Bills, as we saw last week, just get shredded on the ground. They're 29th in football against the rush. So I'm going back to the Isaiah Crowell. See what I did there?
Yeah. The Bills are without, the run stuffing defensive end, Kyle Williams. I imagine he won't be back again this week. So Crowell's in play. I like him less just because he's on the road. But he's a decent punt.
Oh, certainly a decent punt at 4,100. I know I kind of just sound over ecstatic on the guy, but still, the play's decent. And then maybe some of these passing options aren't too bad. I don't know. Terrell Pryor, he only had a measly 3 targets last week against the Bengals, but the week before that against the Giants, he had 12 targets. Could you put him in play?
I think you could, but do you really know which one is going to perform?
Oh no.
It's just there's so many question marks with RG3 behind center. Throw to, I don't even know if he's going to throw effectively. It's probably just an avoid situation for me. You mentioned Crowell. It's him or bust. And on the other side of things,
well, I just forgot to mention too, is like the weather. The weather will certainly play a role in this game. It's not going to be as bad as Chicago. It'll be 25 degrees warmer in Buffalo. It'll be 25 degrees at kickoff with 14-mile-an-hour winds expected. So deep passing will certainly be affected. And really, now that you say something, Terrell Pryor doesn't seem like a great play after all. But yeah, get to your Buffalo Bills point, because that's obviously what we're going to segue to next.
Yeah. So we like Crowell on that side of the ball. I think the logical way to attack this game is just through the running backs. LaShawn McCoy, he's been the leading receiver for the Bills for the past 2 weeks. Offense is ridiculous. Tyrod Taylor has seemed to take a step back these past 5 weeks. There's talk of him not being the long-term solution there in Buffalo anymore. I don't think they're going to trust him with the offensive game plan. So LaShawn McCoy, 100 is priced up. When you're up in that price range, I think people will try to find the extra money to go DJ or Le'Veon, and he should be low owned in a pretty amazing spot at home against the Browns team that honestly looks disinterested and ready for the draft.
Yeah. GameScript is entirely in LaShawn McCoy's favor. They're 10.5 point favorites at home. The wind is going to be insane, so that's going to cut down on any deep passing situations. I don't know. LaShawn McCoy, he might end up being chalky, but I like him a whole lot in this matchup against what I think the league's worst rush defense in Cleveland. So yeah, LaShawn McCoy, fire him up. I think he's going to do great. I think other GPP options, Tyrod Taylor is not too bad of a GPP option in my mind. Matchup's okay, and he also has some upside with his legs. You mentioned the struggles he's had in the past few weeks and how the game plan might shift out of his hands. But still, in his last 3 games against, much slightly better defenses, he's put up 20.4, 14.6, and 16.3 DraftKings points against the Jaguars, Raiders, and Steelers, respectively. So certainly in cash, he can make for a good quarterback at 5,700. And I think he might even correlate. You know what? No, I don't even know what I was looking at. Never mind. Scratch that point. But I thought he correlated well with Sean McCoy, Tyrod Taylor, but no, my reading skills were in a whole other world in that situation. So not the case.
I mean, you can capture every touchdown that the Bills put up if you put those two on the same team.
That's noob logic. That is noob DFS logic right there. But I mean, I guess if it, in a very off chance, it could happen.
It could happen. With the struggles, he's a fine play, I think, in tournaments. Disagree with you on the cash angle. I feel like he has a high upside. He's been playing, doesn't give me a lot of confidence that he can reach it. Do you like Sammy Watkins at all at 59?
Not really. Simply because his upside and his ability to perform is entirely based on the deep ball. And depending on that wind forecast, if that forecast goes down, like if it goes down to like 10, or something like that, I'll trust it a little bit more. But 14, 15, 16 kind of makes me a little hesitant to jump on that.
Agreed.
Which kind of makes Charles Clay his only somewhat reliable target in my mind. Which sounds odd to say out loud, but I don't know. It to some degree, it makes sense.
Yeah. So if you box score watch Charles Clay, it looked like he tweaked, but I think that mainly came from one 40-yard touchdown that he broke away from a defender, missed tackle. You look back at the weeks previous, Charles Clay is just formed. He's been in great situation. He's dudded. So I'm not terribly excited to jump on Charles Clay this week.
All right. Yeah, I mean, it was just a random thought there, but still, the option is there. Let's jump to our next game here. We have the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens favored by 5.5 points right now in a game with a 41.5 point total. Jordan Matthews is questionable in this game with the ankle injury. Is expected to play in week 5, or 15, not 5. Quite a bit of time ago. No injuries on the Ravens side of the ball, except for Jimmy Smith on the defensive end. Hasn't practiced all week, so he might be out. Could have a chain effect that could help the Eagles offensively. And let's talk about this Eagles offense, which I thought they were getting. I thought they were getting Lane Johnson back this week, but maybe not. Are they? Because I don't see anything saying that he is. But mathematically speaking, it's been 10 weeks since he's been suspended. Or 10 games, rather.
Yeah, so if he comes back, how does that impact things from your perspective?
If he comes back, I kind of like these receivers slightly more, because a lot of Carson Wentz's struggles is purely based on the fact that he has no time whatsoever. Ever since Lane Johnson's been out, they have not developed anything. I think the best game that they've played one good game since Lane Johnson's been out, and that was the Atlanta game. Ryan Matthews had room in that one. He was able to run, scored 2 touchdowns in that game. But other than that, they haven't done, like, this offense has not been able to do anything purely because Carson Wentz has no time to develop anything in the pass. And, the running back situation has also, been bad just because how is Ryan Matthews supposed to succeed when the second the ball snapped, he automatically just sees defenders in his vision? How are you supposed to succeed like that?
You can't. You really can't. So I feel like the entire backfield for those is off limits for me because of those reasons you just mentioned. The line's been terrible. Ravens are kind of an attractive matchup from a deep ball. They got torched by Odell Beckham. They got torched by Dez Bryant on Monday night. And that's all after their cornerback, Jimmy Smith, went down with an ankle injury. So I do feel like there's potential for a big play on offense for the Eagles from the slots. I guess he runs a couple deep balls, but I have a tough time trusting Nelson Aguilar. And the hot player in DFS right now is your boy, Zach Ertz.
The guy puts up two good games. The guy puts up 2 straight games. All of a sudden, he's hot. He's hot stuff now.
He is, yeah. He's too high priced, right? At 49.
Oh, see, here's the thing though. He had 2 straight weeks of just cake matchups. And the Bengals. What are they? The Bengals are 20th in the league against opposing tight ends, and Washington
second worst.
Yeah, Washington's 26th. So, yeah, of course, Zach Ertz succeeded when he did. But I don't see how he ends up doing well against a Baltimore Ravens defense that's 3rd against opposing tight ends and then 7th against the pass overall. 1st against the rush. Right? So, there's no way to develop anything more than a one-dimensional offense here this week for the Eagles. I love this team to death. But, I just don't see it happening for them this week. Especially going on the road to Baltimore, who's trying to fight for a playoff spot. Trying to win that AFC North. So it's maybe, with no Jimmy Smith, I could see maybe, I don't even know. None of these guys are big play guys. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
No, it truly beats me who can succeed on this offense this week. Even if Lane Johnson's back and with no Jimmy Smith for Baltimore, I just don't see where they succeed.
I really don't either. Other side of things as well, but kind of for opposite reasons. I expect the Ravens to have a lot of success against the Eagles, who will not be playing a home game, which is the only semblance of success they've had all season. I really like Joe Flacco, averaging about 50 attempts a game. Games pretty mediocre at best. Secondary. It's just I don't know who to play him with. They have a cavalcade of offensive weapons that he spreads the ball out to. Steve Smith, Mike Wallace, the 2 tight ends. I think in this game, the only thing I'm confident of, Flacco will put up a good performance for 5,700.
I think, okay. See, the whole Joe Flacco thing, I think he's only viable if you stack him with someone. You can use him in cash games naked. That's fine by me. But in a tournament, well, okay, now it just sounds stupid. You got to stack him with someone in a tournament. But I think Steve Smith is the guy you go to in this scenario. The Eagles are 14th in the league against wide receivers lined up to the right. And they are just bad. They are 20th, 21st in the league when it comes to defending deep balls thrown to the right side of the field. And that's where Steve Smith normally lines up. So I really like him this week, although Mike Wallace is not a bad option either. If you really wanted to in a tournament, I have no qualms against someone using a Joe Flacco, Steve Smith, Mike Wallace stack. You get really good value for it. None of these guys are anywhere near that expensive. And I think there's a ton of upside in targeting a defense that struggles against the deep ball on both sides of the field.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a smart play.
And then other than that, Kenneth Dixon, Terrence West, that whole thing just doesn't interest me. Eagles are pretty good against the run, 12th in the league. Benny Logan's healthy back in there, which does help the rush defense. So really, other than that stack, I'm not really a fan of this Ravens offense here. Although, I would have said Dennis Pitta, but I can't do it. I can't pull the trigger. I really can't. So
Yeah,
let's jump to our next game here between the Tennessee Titans and the Kansas City Chiefs. Right now, the Chiefs are favored by 5 points in a game that has a 42-point total. No injuries on the Titans side of the ball. No injuries on the Chiefs side of the ball. So, Gary, let's talk about the Titans for a second. Who do you like here?
Yeah, I think this is a good spot for the Titans fantasy-wise. Kansas City gashed by wide receivers in recent weeks. So I'm looking for kind of a bounce back spot for Marcus Mariota. So the defensive scheme for the Chiefs, kind of a man press coverage, which is similar to the Broncos in style. When you play that man press, the quarterback has the ability to scramble and get first downs because everyone in the secondary is looking the wrong way. So I like Mariota's floor for rushing this week. I think there's upside. This game shoots out, so I don't mind Mariota at 65. I kind of like jumping back on Rashard Matthews at 46. He had a tough matchup last week against Chris Harris. Things should be a lot easier this week. Murray, not my favorite play. I think I want to attack the passing game this week. And Delanie Walker does not appeal to me. The Chiefs, for whatever reason, I think their linebacking core is just really good, as well as their safety, Eric Berry. Though they shut down opposing tight ends. So it's not a Delanie Walker week for me. Any other plays on the Titans offense that catch your eye?
I have so many hot takes about what you just said. There are just so All right, let's start with the tight end play. Kansas City's actually 16th against opposing tight ends. So that's pretty much, that's, directly in the middle there. So I don't have anything against using Delanie Walker. The targets are there. He's seen in his last 4 games, he saw 11 targets against the Packers, 6 against the Colts, 4 against the Bears, 7 against the Broncos. I think a lot of recency bias just due to that is just people are going to be off Delanie Walker for that sole reason. And I love the play because of it. Kansas City, I think, might struggle in that situation against Mariota. And then as far as the run is concerned, Kansas City's actually 19th opposing running backs. Which certainly puts DeMarco Murray on my radar at 6,900. Yeah, I really like that play. And deep passes in the middle. The Kansas City Chiefs are actually one of the worst teams in the league against defending the deep ball toward the middle of the field. So Delanie Walker might succeed because of that. And I think I actually am starting to just love Delanie Walker this week.
All right, well let's talk about him. So I think we have a data integrity issue. One of us is wrong, but if we look back at what the Chiefs have done versus the tight end this season, they've only given up 2 touchdowns all year. Last week versus Oakland, 5 catches for 47 yards. The week before, 1 catch for 42 yards. The week before, 4 catches for 43 yards. The week before, 3 catches for 21 yards. Like, that is not the way that you attack this Chiefs defense. But of Delanie Walker and the amount of usage he gets in the offense, I guess you could ride that. I just don't see why that would be the game plan going into Arrowhead.
It could be. It just could be the case. There are some struggles there. And Delanie Walker is obviously just a solid target. overall. So I do like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna stick on the Delaney Walker play and see what happens. But really, my favorite play out of this Titans offense is going to be DeMarco Murray, just because Kansas City is 19th against the rush, and really anything 15th or worse, I do like to target those situations. So definitely Murray, but you can also go Walker in this spot. I mean,
Yeah.
these are the hot takes that I'm just gonna keep dishing out here. I don't know.
Well, I'm glad you're sticking by your play.
Yeah.
We'll see how that one works out.
Yeah,
The other side of things, who do you like there? I feel like you want to attack the Titans secondary. They've been pretty bad.
Yeah, they really have been. Tyreek Hill definitely is a guy that I like in this matchup. His last game against the Raiders, he did score a punt return, or I think it was a punt return or a kick return, one of those two. He did score one of those touchdowns as well as a receiving touchdown. So I really like Tyreek Hill just because of that. And I'm trying to see where Tennessee is when it comes to guys where they are lined up in the field. Yeah, Tennessee's 19th against guys that are lined up to the right. So yeah, I really like Tyreek Hill just because of that. I don't know how many times I really need to say that, but I think the point is made even more emphasized the more that I say it. Not really a Spencer Ware fan here. Other options, you could obviously go Travis Kelce. You can never go wrong with Travis Kelce. Tennessee, though, is 10th in the league against opposing tight ends. However, I still do like Kelce and Hill in this matchup. What about you?
Yeah, Kelce's put up 4 straight 100-yard receiving games. For whatever reason, Andy Reid has unleashed him in the offense, which he probably should have done this season. But there's not a lot of tight ends that even have a ceiling of 100 receiving yards, and Kelce's doing it every week. So he is definitely in play for me. Tyreek Hill, I love the upside play there. He's priced to a point where I don't think ownership will be crazy. And I don't like the running game, Spencer Ware versus the Titans front on to attack. And Alex Smith, if we like his pass catchers, I guess we have to like him, but in a very long time. So my exposure to him would be very limited.
I mean, to kind of counteract that point there about the quarterback, if you like the receivers, you kind of have to like the quarterback. That's not 100% true, because I do remember talking to, I went to Chicago about like a month ago talking to, DFS pros, and, you don't have to like the quarterback in those scenarios, because there was a situation where Jay Cutler, this was the first week of the Alshon suspension, and I mean, I think so. And, there were guys like Cameron Meredith, Zach Miller, guys, the pros like those two receivers, but they didn't like Jay Cutler. And I was questionable about it. I was like, why would that be the case? And it's simply because the upside is there in both of those receivers. Like you wouldn't roster those two receivers together, right? But you would put, if you're making like 100 lineups, each of them would be in 50 lineups each, but like alternating or whatever. But you wouldn't necessarily like the quarterback, and you just keep those receivers as like one roster spot on the team. So that's kind of how I could base that logic of, oh, I like Tyreek Hill and I like Travis Kelce, but I don't like Alex Smith a whole lot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get that. I think that makes sense. Well, if you played both Cameron Meredith and Zach Miller on the same lineup, wouldn't you have to play Jay Cutler?
No, the situation wouldn't be that these guys would be in the same lineup. Like this situation would be like if you were making 10 lineups. Each of those guys would be in 5 lineups, but they wouldn't be together.
Interesting. Well, this is the DFS strategy session.
Hey, I mean,
I agree with
this
you.
Is a DFS show. I gotta make myself sound smart somehow.
I think you did. That makes a lot of sense.
All right, so we've talked ad nauseum about that. Let's jump to our next game here between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals. Steelers are favored by 3 points right now in a game that has a 44-point total. No injuries on the Steelers side of the ball, no injuries on the Bengals side of the ball. And okay, with all that being said, let's just jump right into the Steelers offense here. And the first thing I look at when I'm evaluating all of this is that Le'Veon Bell's 9,800 on DraftKings. That's insane. That is just insane. I mean, that's David Johnson prices of a few weeks ago. I don't know. How do we attack this?
So, insane. It's not even David Johnson, because David Johnson got priced up. But spending $10K on one player, you have to really give it a double take for this week. Is yes, I still want Le'Veon. In addition to the Bengals not being up for running backs, you have the whole narrative street angle. Le'Veon Bell just thinks that they target him specifically. They gave him the knee injury. They had to work his way back. Just the whole idea that he's been working to get his revenge on this team, no matter what the price. We saw him last week in Buffalo just completely annihilate what wasn't a cake matchup in Buffalo. So, scare me. Ben's road away splits inversely correlates with Le'Veon's road away splits. Like when Ben's sucking, they go to Le'Veon Bell, and I expect that to happen again this week.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you got a Cincinnati team that's 23rd in football against opposing running backs, and I didn't check this out yet, but I don't think they're too good. I mean, they're 13th against running backs as wide receivers. So yeah, definitely the matchup for Le'Veon Bell is fantastic this week. And I really like it in cash. I don't know if I can stomach it in GPPs though, unless I can see the value opening up. And I don't know. I just don't know if that's the case. Definitely a contrarian stack this week might be, a Roethlisberger Brown stack. That isn't really too expensive at all. Especially going up against a Bengals defense that's, what was it, 27th against wide receivers lined up to the left, and about 23rd against the deep ball to the left side of the field. So definitely I like a Roethlisberger Brown stack. But again, you mentioned the road home splits. That's definitely going to be contrarian and might be worth a look. Just because of Le'Veon Bell's insanely high price tag.
The Ben Brown stack or for the Steelers this week is going to be Ladarius Green, because the matchup is so juicy. We talked about Zach Ertz performing well in cake matchups. Well, this is the cake matchup against Cincinnati. We saw him blow up 2 weeks ago. They didn't need him last week because they were in the snow, and Le'Veon Bell was having a career day. I could see in this spot. So if you want to do that, pretty smart way to leverage yourself up the leaderboard in GPPs, just know that you're betting against history with Ben's road away splits. So there is risk there, but that's, you got to stomach risk if you want to get a big payout.
Exactly. That's what all top tournament players will tell you. And then looking at the Bengals side of the ball, AJ Green's obviously not back in this, and Tyler Eifert has definitely been the target. He's just been dominating the past 2 games. And he's going up against a Pittsburgh Steelers defense that is 8th in the league against opposing tight ends. Eifert's last few games, they've been against teams that have been okay against opposing tight ends. But yeah, I'm struggling to see a whole lot of love here for this Bengals offense other than Tyler Eifert.
I completely agree. I don't think we really need to dissect it AJ Green might be back. I doubt it, but that just throws another wrench into the mix. It's Eifert or bust for me.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on to our next game here between the Detroit Lions and the New York Giants. Giants are favored by 4 right now in a game that has a 41-point total. Theo Riddick is questionable for this game. Hasn't practiced all week with the wrist injury. Was out last week, so definitely monitor his status. Matthew Stafford is questionable this week with a finger injury. He's been practicing all week with special fingerless gloves, so I guess that's helping him out a little bit. And then on the Giants side of the ball, there are no injuries to look at. So let's just jump into this Detroit Lions offense. And I can't see a whole lot going well for them this week. The Giants defense has just been very good this season. Fifth against the pass, fifth against the rush. They don't really struggle on any side of the field. They're 13th on the left side of the field, third against the middle, seventh against the right. If anything, I'm liking the Giants' defense a whole lot as a GPP option.
I'm so happy to hear you say that because that is my thought exactly. The Giants have been playing really well. We saw them shut down the Cowboys in prime time. That secondary is no joke, and if Riddick is out and Stafford has a broken finger on his hand, which done before, he broke that index finger back in 2011 when they had 3 games left in the season, and over those last 3 games, he threw 9 interceptions. So strange that we have historical precedent for a broken index finger, but it's not good. I have no problem jumping on the Giants at 2,900 on DraftKings. I think that's a smart play. The only lines that I'm remotely interested in would be Golden Tate reasons, and the way that you attack the Giants is kind of over the middle, but I don't really think the Giants. I think we ride the cold, we ride strength, and we play the Giants defense. And then on the other side of things, Odell Beckham at home against the Lions secondary, I think that's a smart play. And Shepard is a little bit too touchdown dependent for me at this point. We saw Eli look like Eli. Compliments on Sunday Night Football. So I'm not really going back to that well. I think they're going to play ball control and kind of milk the game away. And you're basically playing the defense or hoping for a Odell Beckham.
Yeah, that's essentially what you're doing. I mean, Odell Beckham's going up against Darius Slay, which that's not really a matchup I normally like to target. But it's certainly decent as a GPP option. Other than that, I'm not very excited about this Giants offense either. Detroit is actually pretty solid defensively on occasion, even though they are 30th against the pass, 24th against the rush. Maybe Sterling Shepard might be your option here, but he's like a deep tournament play. I really can't trust much from this game when it comes to offensive upside. Really, all I can say is, again, like we've been emphasizing, just play the Giants defense.
Yep.
All right, let's jump to our next game here between the Indianapolis Colts and the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings are favored by 4 points in this one, with a total of 45.5. A lot of injuries here on the Colts side. Dante Moncrief has not practiced all week with a hamstring injury. Monitor his status, of course. T.Y. Hilton has sat out practice today on Thursday with a back injury, so he's questionable for this week. Andrew Luck is questionable this week with a shoulder injury, has been limited in practice all week, but he has been confirmed to be starting on Sunday, so that's good for him. And then Dwayne Allen is questionable this week with a hip injury. Did not practice on Wednesday. No, practice limited on Wednesday and Thursday. So he should be good to go, I think. I don't know, though, for sure. Obviously, check on that status. And then on the Vikings side of the ball, Stephon Diggs has been limited in practice all week with a knee injury. And Sam Bradford has been limited in practice all week as well with the shoulder injury. But both of those two are expected to play in this week's game. So after all that, Gary, share your thoughts on this Colts offense here against your skull.
Yeah, against my skull. So I'll start off by saying that I will actually be at this game. I am doing my pilgrimage that is necessary as a Vikings fan to go to the homeland and watch them play. So I'm excited for that. I'm hopeful that this game will be exciting. I'm not so sure that that is the realistic outcome of it. If Moncrief is out, I think that's to luck. He'll be increasingly relying on T.Y. Hilton, who can certainly perform, and I think he'll be peppered with targets. The Vikings secondary is not to be reckoned with by anybody. So I see the Vikings defense being in play. Have a lot of probably because I'm going to the game, but I think Sam Bradford at minimum price, an okay play, because I would love to stack him with Stephon Diggs and hope he kind of explodes. I think Kyle Rudolph has a nice game. It's a Colts defense that's not that great against the tight end. And I can even see Jerick McKinnon, who they've really involved him in the passing game. I could see them trying to match backup linebackers for the Colts, who did not fare very well last week against Lamar Miller, doing a similar game plan that the Texans did. So for me, this game is the Vikings defense, the Sam Bradford to Kyle Rudolph and Stephon Diggs, possibly Jerick McKinnon, and a whole lot of beer because it's going to be freezing in Minnesota.
Well, at least you'll be indoors.
Yes,
it's not like the last two scenes where they were playing outside. Like you were saying though, with the Colts defense, they're not very good at much. Overall on the year, they're 26th against the pass, 30th against the rush. I really don't think Jerick McKinnon's in play because of that, but still. And then, breaking it down by position, Indianapolis is. Let me find them here. They're 31st against wide receiver ones, 30th against opposing tight ends, 30th against running backs as wide receivers. And then you look at it, lined up on the field. You got the Colts being 26th against guys lined up to the left, 27th against guys lined up in the middle, 30th against guys lined up to the right. They're just bad on defense. And they also can't even take advantage of the bad Minnesota Vikings offensive line. They're 21st in adjusted sack rate in football. They've only sacked 25 times this year, which is below average. So I don't see any situation where Stephon Diggs doesn't dominate this game, and maybe even Sam Bradford is a good stack. Gary, you really might be going to quite a performance by the Vikings on Sunday.
I really hope so. So yeah, it's nice to hear that there's some optimism from non-homers like yourself. So I'll take that with me as I make the pilgrimage.
Man, that's gonna be awesome. Let's jump to our next game here between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans. Texans are favored by 5.5 points right now in a game that has a 39.5 point total. Allen Hurns is questionable in this one with a hamstring injury, has not practiced all week, is not expected to play this week. Chris Ivory has been limited in practice all week with a hamstring injury as well. And then on the Texans side of things, we have DeAndre Hopkins, who has been limited in practice all week with the hamstring injury. And CJ Fedorowicz has not practiced all week due to the concussion. He might not play either. Obviously, monitor injuries as the week goes on. So let's look at this Jaguars offense. The only thing I can say is Texans defense. That's really all I can say here. Because if this Jaguars offense can't perform in cake matchups against like Detroit, where they really aren't that good defensively, then how are they supposed to do well against a team that is 12th in DVOA against the pass and 18th in DVOA against the run? Like, they're not fantastic numbers, but the Jaguars have played teams this year that have been worse, and they've looked bad in those games.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Much in this game on either side that I'm interested in. So this might be a kind of a time saver for the podcast, unless there's something that you see.
Oh, there's absolutely nothing that I like offensively in this game. I just wanted to say Houston defense and just be done with it, because this game is just awful for fantasy purposes.
I agree. Yep.
I mean, one quick note though. I mean, you could stack like Will Fuller for the kick return upside for the double dip, but that's really it there. Yeah, so let's move on to a game with some more fantasy promise to it, and that is the New Orleans Saints going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals are favored by 3 points right now in a game that has a 51-point total. Michael Thomas for the Saints is questionable this week with a foot injury. Has been limited in practice all week after not playing on Sunday against the Buccaneers. So his status is certainly being upgraded as the week goes on. Mark Ingram is questionable this week with both knee and toe injuries. He returned to practice in limited fashion on Thursday after not practicing on Wednesday. So those are the Saints injuries. And then on the Cardinals side of the ball, they just released Michael Floyd due to the DUI, but that's its own comedic situation, I guess, that we'll talk about in a second. So John Brown is questionable this week with a sickle cell thing going on. He's been limited in practice on Thursday. Jermaine Gresham is questionable this week with a knee injury. He did return to practice, is expected to play. And then Jamarcus Nelson is questionable with a knee injury, has been limited in practice. That's J.J. Nelson. Yeah, what? I don't even know anymore. I don't even know. So he's questionable in this week as well. So after reading off every single possible injury under the sun, let me get a drink of water and share some of your plays here that you like in this matchup for the Saints here, Gary.
Yeah, well, let's start with the last person you mentioned on the injury report. So J.J. Nelson seems to be in a pretty nice spot. Now that Floyd is gone, he will be the de facto starting wide receiver there. When he stepped in for Floyd in Week 8, he came in and put up more than pays off his salary at $3,900. He burst onto the scene there, and then he was announced that he's going to be a huge part of the offense, and then he really squandered that opportunity. So I hope he kind of learned his lesson, and I'm willing to take a chance on him again in a pretty tasty matchup against the Saints. Cardinals offense kind of had a bit of bad luck going down to Miami and getting swallowed up in a rainstorm that caused David Johnson to fumble, which he normally doesn't do, and Carson Palmer got his touchdown late because the whole game was just a downpour. So I like this as a back spot for them. So Carson Palmer, David Johnson, Larry Fitz, and J.J. Nelson are all in play. And then the punt that we alluded to before, Jermaine Gresham down to 2,500. He's getting 5 to 10 targets a game at the stone cold minimum of 2,500 on DraftKings. Like, if you're trying to save some money at the tight end position, I think that's a pretty smart play. And then the Arizona defense is probably not my favorite because we talked about the Giants at the similar price point, but the Saints haven't looked terribly good the past couple weeks against the Lions, against the Bucks. Now they're traveling in Arizona, and I could see those struggles continuing. So if you want a low-owned, high-upside defense, I think you could go them as well. What are your thoughts from the Cardinals side before we jump to the Saints?
Well, for the Cardinals side of the ball, first of all, David Johnson at 10,100 on DraftKings is absolutely insane. I don't see where I roster him. Uh, I mean, maybe cash, because there's certainly some value that you can get for cash this week. But tournaments, same thing with Le'Veon Bell, like slightly worse. David Johnson takes up over 20% of your cap. So it's like, how do you roster this guy? And I just like you don't, right? So other parts of this offense you can take advantage of. Definitely Jermaine Gresham, like you said, JJ Nelson possibly. But that's really it. The amount of trust I have in Carson Palmer is very low. Right? I just don't. I mean, I really don't have a whole lot of trust in it, even if he's going up against a pretty bad defense in the New Orleans Saints, who are 28th in the league against the pass. No, I still just don't trust Carson Palmer. Like, this season has, for whatever reason, just changed my perspective on the guy. And then jumping over to the Saints side of the ball, you can't entirely knock them out of consideration. They still have a pretty high Vegas implied total of 24 points. So certainly some things you could take advantage of here. A Drew Brees stack with one of his receivers. Figuring out who is obviously going to be the very difficult question to ask. I would go Brandon Cooks just because the Cardinals are 17th in the league against wide receivers lined up on the right side of the field. So a Brees Cooks stack is certainly not out of consideration for me. I mean, I would say Coby Fleener, but the Cardinals are 4th in the league against opposing tight ends, so I'm not going there. But really, I have nothing against the Drew Brees, Brandon Cook stack that is going to be extremely low owned this week. In a favorable environment in Arizona, weather-wise, a weather-wise favorable environment for him.
Yeah, so high upside GPP play there for sure. My qualm with it is just that Patrick Peterson, I think, will be heavily involved with guarding Cooks. He kind of came out and said that Cooks is the number one guy for the offense, and Patterson is the opposing team's number one. So that scares me a little bit for Cooks' ceiling, but we know what Brees can do in the dome at home. On the road, why not? I don't hate the play.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is too, if that's going to be the case with Brandon Cooks, then I'm going to Michael Thomas if he's in this week. And if Michael Thomas isn't in, then I'm going Willie Snead. It really, in my mind, it's just going to be the next man up mentality with this team, because all of the receivers on the Saints have shown that they have upside because of Drew Brees being as good as he is. So you know what? I'm going somewhere with this team. I just don't know where yet. Just depending on things that develop over the course of the next few days here leading up to Sunday, I'm going to go heavily to a New Orleans Saints stack. Just don't know where yet.
Okay.
So we've talked about that game pretty good. Let's move on to our next one here between the San Francisco 49ers and the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons are favored by an insane 14 points in a game that has a 51.5 point total. On the 49ers side of the ball, Torrey Smith is questionable this week with a concussion, hasn't practiced all week, is likely to be out for that game. And on the Falcons side of the ball, Julio Jones is questionable this week with the turf toe injury, hasn't practiced all week. His status remains up in the air for this one. Mohamed Sanu is practicing in limited fashion this week after being out last week with the groin injury against the Rams. Nothing else for the Falcons. So let's talk about this 49ers team first. And I don't know. I think Vegas might be underrating them just a little bit. I mean, they are implied for 18.8 points, but they're huge underdogs. But here's the thing: Atlanta's defense was kind of like they kind of had like an outlier week last week. I did roster them in GPPs though. I really like them because of their ability to generate quarterback hurries and the inability for the Rams to defend much. But the San Francisco 49ers offensive line I need to look at them a little bit for a second. Actually, they're pretty bad too. So I can see, oh, this changes everything. Because here's the thing, because Atlanta forces a ton of quarterback hurries, and that's normally what I like to call like the sole predictor of fantasy defensive success. Um, yeah, that's mainly what I use. But on the surface, Colin Kaepernick by himself could have some upside to him. Um, but again, like I said before, just the hurries that the Falcons force and the 49ers offensive line being even worse than the Rams offensive line, I'm kind of going back to the Falcons defensive well. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm chasing points or anything, but the matchup's great. Again, it's actually even better this week than it was last week for the Falcons. So I'm going Falcons defense here. What about you?
Yeah, the logic you just laid out makes perfect sense. I will point out a great I found on Twitter from Lord Reeves. Fantasy points per drive. Atlanta actually passing fantasy points allowed per drive. Atlanta's number 1 in allowance. So like this is the perfect matchup for Colin Kaepernick, who volatility I think of any in the NFL this season. So I could see him just a monster game, or I could see him doing what he did in the second half against the Jets, which was absolutely nothing. Bounced by Vic Beasley and those other pass rushers that the Falcons can come at you with. So Colin Kaepernick, I also don't mind playing the Falcons defense. I'll sprinkle both of them. If this game is close, I really like Carlos Hyde, but that's a huge if. The Falcons have been playing 29. Last person I'll mention is Vance McDonald, who, whenever the 49ers are actually moving the ball, has a pretty high share in that offense. The Falcons fantasy points to opposing tight ends in PPR leagues, so I don't mind that dart throw. Just wanted to mention him. But my favorite play from this game is Devonta Freeman for the Falcons at 6,700 on DraftKings. Last week, you mentioned that being kind of a black star event where the defense scored 2 touchdowns, which, by the way, congratulations to you for playing them. I really wish I had them on a couple of lineups, but I did not. Touchdowns basically took the starters out of the game in the fourth quarter, mean that they're going to be on the field. Like, they didn't need to do anything. So Freeman put up a pretty bad box score, which I think would have been different had his services actually been needed, up against a 49ers team that gave up, 180 yards to Bilal Paul, 2 touchdowns last week. Like, that's atrocious. And that was when they were at home. Now they're on the road. I think Freeman is going to be in for a nice game. Play for the Falcons. What about you?
I mean, I definitely like both of these running backs this week. I mean, Devonta Freeman does get more snaps, but Tevin Coleman does have a similar amount of GPP upside when they're both healthy. So I don't know. I think I might go where lowership is lower, and that's going to be in Tevin Coleman. He's $1,700 cheaper on DraftKings, and ownership is going to be much lower. I might be going to the Tevin Coleman well, except if I do, like if I find out that Freeman's going to be higher owned or lower owned of the two, I might go him. But really, the play that I like here is a running back from Atlanta stacked with the defense. Just plain and simple running back defensive correlation. I just think the game script is going to go perfectly in those two positions' favors, and I don't think there's a ton of upside in much else in terms of the passing game here for the Falcons, just because it's probably going to be a blowout early.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's a good correlation play for sure.
All right, so I think we're both on the same page there. Let's move on to our next game here between the Oakland Raiders and the San Diego Chargers. Raiders are favored by 3 points right now in a game that features a 49-point total. Injuries on the Raiders side of the ball, we have Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree, who have both been limited in practice all week, but they're fully expected to play this week against the Chargers. So no issues there. On the other side of the ball for the Chargers, Melvin Gordon is doubtful for this week with the hip injury. Might not be back for the rest of the year. So he's definitely out with that hip. And that makes Kenneth Farrow certainly in play. We'll talk about him when we get to the Chargers offense. But that's it for the Chargers injuries. Let's talk about the Oakland Raiders offense here. And on the surface, Vegas implies them to score 26 points. I know, like some of the higher totals on the slate, but San Diego is pretty good against the pass this year, where Oakland has thrived. All right, San Diego's number 1 in the league against receivers lined up on the left side of the field. I mean, they're a paltry 25th against guys lined up in the middle. Throws toward the middle, but they are 6th against guys lined up to the right, and they're 6th against the deep ball. So while on the surface, it seems like the Raiders are in a good matchup, with Vegas, how Vegas is projecting it. I don't think it's that good of a matchup for Oakland, especially going to San Diego, where I think it's the second game of a division. Yeah, it's the second game in the division this season with these two teams. I don't like it at all for the Raiders offensively.
Yeah, my view is that I would rather have a piece of the Raiders rushing attack than stacking the passing attack here. Latavius Murray has been pretty consistent lately, and a couple things have really gotten me on him this week is that the Chargers have lost their run-stuffing nose tackle in Brandon Mebane. Palopi? I don't know how to pronounce him. He's suspended. He's out, and then the Raiders are getting back Osemele on their offensive line. So, that swing in players makes me like, just on the surface, the running attack for the Raiders, and then you take into consideration that the Chargers have notoriously been Swiss cheese versus running backs. The Raiders are at, you mentioned the second game. I don't think there's going to be a lot of trickery here. Try to run the ball, considering that Derek Carr has an injured hand and didn't look very good last week. Latavius Murray is the one person on the Raiders that I will be targeting.
I can certainly agree with that play. I mean, the Chargers are 15th in the league against the rush. So they are essentially middle of the road, but, on paper, it's a good play nonetheless. And then moving on to the Chargers side of the ball, Kenneth Farrow at 4,400. He'll probably be a pretty chalky value play just because there's not much else going on in that Chargers backfield, and he's going to get a ton of opportunities. Definitely, I don't know. I don't find a reason to fade the chalk in this scenario, especially when they're going up against an Oakland Raiders rush defense that's 26th in the league. They're pretty bad. So I really like Kenneth Farrow in the spot. Don't get cute with it. Just play him. And then as far as other as far as the receivers are concerned, for the Chargers, Oakland is pretty good when it comes to guys on the outside, but they're not good against the deep ball. They're 23rd in the league against the deep ball. So maybe a guy like Dontrell Inman, I really like him this week at 5,100 on DraftKings, 55 on FanDuel. Just a really good play, and I think he has a ton of upside in the matchup, especially because his target's been fairly consistent. In his last 5 games, he's seen 9, 9, 6, 5, and 7 targets, respectively. I just really like the spot for him this week.
Yeah, I thought you might go back to your boy Dontrell Inman. I'm with you this week. I think he's a good play. You mentioned the Raiders giving up the deep ball. Tyrell Williams, when they played earlier this year, had a line of 5 receptions for 117 yards and a touchdown. So he can exploit them deep as well. So I'm a little surprised that you're so gung-ho about Pharaoh. That was the key for me this week, was that I wasn't sure whether or not to play him. But the fact that you're so solidly on him gives me a little bit more comfort. You know, he's an athletic guy, and I was going to pop in some tape before Sunday to see, just give it the old eye test. But the volume and the price just says play him. So regardless, you should have some exposure to him this weekend. Just kind of use your own gut to let you know how much you should be playing. And the one thing I'll also mention is Antonio Gates' narrative street at 441 is, he's going for the all-time tight end touchdown record. He needs 2 more, I believe, to tie Tony Gonzalez, and they're at home this week, so I would imagine they would want to do it there. So I think he's in play in GPP for that touchdown upside.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Again, like I said, don't get cute with the Kenneth Pharaoh play. Just play him. He's cheap. He's going to get a ton of opportunities. Go contrarian elsewhere if need be. Let's move on to our next game here. We have the New England Patriots going up against the Denver Broncos. Let's pull it up here. All right, the Patriots are favored by 3 points right now in a game that has a 44-point total. No injury news here for the Patriots side of the ball. On the Broncos, no injury news there either. So let's just jump into this Patriots offense. They're going to Denver against, of course, a defense that is very well respected. Although they are first against the pass, they're a measly 25th against the run. So LeGarrette Blount, for me, might be a kind of interesting tournament play. Other than that, I don't find a whole ton of excitement in this New England Patriots offense this week. I mean, we are talking about Tom Brady, but we're also talking about a pass defense for Denver that just doesn't give up anything, especially when they're at home.
We're on the same page. LeGarrette Blount's in play. The one area through the air that you can attack the Broncos is the tight end position. When they played last year, they had Gronk and they just fed Gronk. There is no Gronk. I just like saying this name. I imagine they would have a similar game plan. They would try to match him up against the linebackers and give him a lot of targets. So play at 4,000. But in this game, it's really the defenses. I think you can roster either of those. LeGarrette Blount, and then on the Broncos side of things, their run game is just imploded. They're counting on Trevor Siemian to throw constantly, which could do not, but targets are going to go to Emmanuel Sanders. Last time these two teams played, that's where they went. Demaryius Thomas, I believe, has 3 catches the past 2 times that they've played the Patriots, because Logan Ryan kind of shutting him down. So that's drastic splits to normally see similar volume. So for me, it's Sanders at 6,600 and those plays on the Patriots side of things.
Yeah, I mean, the Emmanuel Sanders play, you also have to look at, like, New England is 32nd in football when it comes to defending receivers on the right side of the field. So definitely just a huge bump to Emmanuel Sanders at 6,600 just because of that. Everything else here, I just don't like. The Patriots overall are 27th against the pass. They're pretty bad, but they're second, I think. Let me double check that. They're second in the league against the rush. So Booker is just not in play for me because of that, and everything else just is not going to work out just because Siemian is so bad at quarterback. Emmanuel Sanders is kind of like your only hope here for offense in this game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right. So with that game nice and discussed, let's move on to our last game of the slate here between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys are favored by 7 points right now in a game that features a 46.5-point total. Adam Humphries is questionable for the Buccaneers with the concussion. He's cleared the concussion protocol and should be able to play this week against the Cowboys. And then on the Cowboys side of the ball, Dez Bryant has been limited in practice all week with a back injury, but he should be able to go on Sunday. So let's talk about this Buccaneers offense here. And I don't see much going on for them. Certainly you can always play Mike Evans in a tournament. I really like the tournament play for him this week as well. The Dallas Cowboys are not really that great defensively, although they are 10th in the league against wide receivers that line up to the left. So that's certainly something to keep in mind. But overall, the Cowboys have just gone with the offense is their best defense mentality. Just because they're 24th in the league against the pass, but 4th against the rush. There's just a lot that goes into that just says, Dallas's offense just holds the ball for a long time, thus keeping the opposing offense off the field. So really, long story short, Mike Evans is the play here for Tampa Bay, no one else. Do we agree on that, or
could not agree more?
Takes?
No. I'll add to your fire with the Evans take. Morris Claiborne being out for the Cowboys kind of opens things up for Evans. You mentioned ball control. I imagine they're going to be down, and they're going to try to hurry things up to get back into the game, and I think that just funnels everything to Mike Evans. So that's the only exposure to the Bucs side of things that I want. And conversely, for the Cowboys, so many things line up for them this week. The fact that Dak Prescott struggled against the Giants on Sunday Night Football, I think they're going to just rely on the ground game and their offensive line to settle things down and to quiet the whispers of Tony Romo on the sideline. So that narrative plays really strong in my mind this week. So Ezekiel Elliott, for me, despite the matchup not being great with the Bucs, I think the offensive line has proven time and time again that it doesn't matter who they play, they'll just push you out of the way. I think 8,200 is a fair price for Elliott this week. And Dez Bryant at 68 on DraftKings, I'm not terribly interested in that, mainly because I think they're just going to play ball control and not take too many shots deep. So what do you see for the Cowboys here?
No, there's absolutely no need for the for the Cowboys to take a ton of risk. Tampa Bay's been pretty good against the pass this year. They're 3rd against wide receivers that line up to the left. I believe they're wrong thing there. They're 6th overall in the league against the pass. So really, I'm not a fan of any of these passing options, but Ezekiel Elliott makes for a fantastic Sunday night hammer play. Tampa Bay's 21st in the league in DVOA against the rush. And of course, the offensive line, like you mentioned before. And then Tampa Bay overall, I mean, they're okay. Their offensive line's okay. They're 13th in adjusted sack rate. Force a decent amount of quarterback hurries, but I don't think that's going to be a problem this week. I just think Ezekiel Elliott's going to get a lot of these carries. Dak Prescott's going to – I mean, this is a narrative street for Dak Prescott just because, a ton of people are, for whatever reason, calling for his benching after Sunday night's game against the Giants. So I just think the narrative street will be there, and him and Ezekiel Elliott will just rush this team to victory. All the pun intended.
Yeah.
So all right, so that does it for our game breakdowns here, and of course we like to end every show by building a DraftKings tournament lineup. And of course, Gary, I always give you the first pick because I am a gentleman that I am. So of course you have the first pick in our draft.
Why, thank you, sir. We'll start things off because you convinced me not to overthink things. Let's go with Pharaoh at 4,400 at running back. Price are there. So let's lock him in.
All right, so Pharaoh's locked in. And of course, again, like I said, don't get cute with it. Just take the guy who's going to get a ton of opportunities against a bad rush defense and call it that. I don't know who to. I guess I'm going to go with our Sunday night hammer that we just discussed as our second running back in Ezekiel Elliott. The matchup's just fantastic, and I think game script will go entirely in his favor.
I like that call. So we are at an average of 5,300 per player. We talked about Emmanuel Sanders being the entire offense for the Broncos. I want that volume on our team, so put him in at 6,600.
Solid option there. All right, I'll go with another receiver here. See, I don't know the entire situation as of now. I don't know. I would go with a Saints receiver, but as of right now, I just don't know what their situation is going to be with Michael Thomas and then where Patrick Peterson lines up. So I'm going to go with another option that I really like this week, and that is Steve Smith. As I was saying earlier in the show, the Eagles are just dreadful against the deep ball this year, and they're not very good against wide receivers lined up to the right. Leotis McKelvin is just a not poor, but he's just an inconsistent defender, and Steve Smith just has a ton of upside, so I really like him this week in the matchup.
That's a great play. So you're kind of directing me for how to fill out this lineup. Quarterback, let's put Joe Flacco at 5,700. Really high on him this week. So we got the Flacco, Steve Smith stack, leaving about 5,000 left for the last four spots.
That is ultra bold right there. I'll go tight end with our next pick. I don't know. I kind of want to do this to you, and I kind of don't at the same time. But I am going to do it to you. So we're going to go Delanie Walker. I think Delanie Walker just has the upside this week. And then I think the targets might be there, and just people are not going to be on him. So I really like the idea of using Delanie Walker in GPPs this week, and he's a solid value at 3,900. So that doesn't hurt.
You called your shot. I'm glad you're sticking with it. Let's see. So we have 5,300 left for wide receiver flex and a defense. Let's see here. Let's do Latavius Murray, 5,800 in the flex as our third running back on this roster, leaving about $5,050 left for a wide receiver and a defense.
All right. I'm not going to get too crazy with it. We are simply just going to roster the Falcons defense. The matchup, again, like I said before, I don't want to chase. I'm not saying that this call is about chasing points. This call is about that this matchup for the Falcons is much better than last week's matchup. We all saw how that went. So I'm going back to the Falcons well this week on defense, and that leaves us with 6,200 left for our final wide receiver.
With 6,200 left, man, I'm going to the game. I am not going to pass up this opportunity to put Diggs on the lineup.
Oh, it fits beautifully.
It fits so perfectly. It was destined by the gods. So we have $0 remaining with a lineup of Joe Flacco, Ezekiel Elliott, Pharaoh, Emmanuel Sanders, Steve Smith, Stephon Diggs, Delanie Walker, Latavius Murray, and the Falcons defense.
I think this looks beautiful. That'll do it for our show this week. Join us next week for the Week 16 show. This has been the Trips Wide Week 15 podcast presented by RotoQL with your hosts, Evan Cheney and Gary Huber. And if we are not winning all of the money, we hope you guys do. So good luck in your contest this week.
Peace.